Hey guys, so this is the software design and development exam, multiple choice 2022 paper. So I'm going to run it through and explain all the questions and all the answers. So question one, which is the following pseudocode keywords is associated with multi-way selection? So if you remember, we have binary selection and multi-way selection. So the binary selection is an if statement, and a multi-way selection is a case where. So the answer to this is A. Repeat and while are not selection, they are repetition. So if you remember the three fundamentals to programming, you have sequence, you have selection, and you have repetition. Okay, so multi-way selection, case where. Because the idea is you can choose multiple options or pathways based on the case. So the best way to actually show this would be like, for example, you should say case, x equals 3, for example, right? So the variable in question would be x. So the case where x equals 3, you execute some sort of statement like print x is 3 or something. And then you have a case where, x is less than 3, and then you do something different. And then you might have another case where x is greater than 3, as an example. So, cool. All right, question 2. A user is asked to enter the state in which they live, for example, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland. Which screen element ensures the text entered is valid? In this case, you would do a drop-down list, so D. Now, the reason that is because a checkbox allows you to choose multiple options. So in this case, they can only choose one state, obviously, so it doesn't make sense to have multiple states selected. So a checkbox doesn't make sense. A scroll bar doesn't make sense either. A text box, you don't want this to be free form. You want three. You have three concrete options, and the user can only select one. So in that case, a drop-down list, because a drop-down list is you can choose multiple. You can see multiple options, but you can only click one of them. So, yeah. Question 3. The day before a school swimming carnival, the sports teacher used spreadsheet software to develop an application enabling her to store and process the results during the carnival. Which development approach did she use? Okay, so with development approaches, the key to this is you kind of need to know all of them. So let's just run through the major ones. So structured is also known as the waterfall method of engineering, where you go through each development stage sequentially. And the key to this question and the key to this course is structured is usually for large projects, right? So think of it like, building medical software for a hospital, or building a bridge, large projects. Agile is for like quick development, like building like an app for the App Store, right? Like a little 2D game for the App Store, and you need quick development. Prototyping is where you create a prototype to demonstrate to the client. And end user is when the software developer who creates the software also is going to be the final client who ends up using the software. So in this case, the big tell is that sports teacher is the end user because she creates this spreadsheet software to create her own application. So she is the user. So in this case, the answer is B. Question 4, what type of system modeling tool is this? Okay, so, okay. This could have been a really big trick question, but it's not. The answer is a context diagram. So a context diagram. So a context diagram, they didn't actually list it here because they're nice, but there's also something called a data flow diagram. And a context diagram and data flow diagram look similar, and have similar elements. But the thing is, with a context diagram, you have a single process, which is represented by this circle, and then you have as many entities as you need, right? So think of a context diagram as like a high-level overview of the system. Now, a data flow diagram is different in that you can have unlimited processes, usually more than one, so two or more, right? And it represents a more detailed view of a system, or the flow of data through a system. A storyboard is how you represent functionality of the UI of an app. So obviously it's not this. A system flowchart represents the hardware, how the hardware interacts. So it's obviously not this. And an IPO chart represents the input, process, and output of data in a system, such as like tracking the variables. So obviously not this. Right, question 5. Which of the following requires inclusivity to be considered when designing interfaces for a proposed system? So the keyword here is inclusivity. This would fall under social and ethical issues. So inclusivity is like making sure that everyone's catered for. So the answer to this would be B. A culturally diverse user base has different values and different expectations. So that would be when you're designing a certain system, you want to make sure that it appeals to many different cultures in this case. It wouldn't be incomplete testing, the use of images created by others. It wouldn't be the storage of sensitive customer data because that has to do with like more privacy. And this is like more of a C relates to copyright and intellectual property. D relates more to like security and privacy. So inclusivity is more B. All right, 6. What is the main benefit of collaboration between developers? So in this case, it's not copyright. It's not training of more developers. It's not necessarily simplification of code maintenance. The answer is D, production of better quality product. So that's the idea of collaborating between developers is so you can build something better. Okay, so now, so 7, a large amount of data is to be accessed by different systems. The data is to be accessed randomly. What is the most effective way to store this data? Okay, so a few key things here. To be accessed randomly. So it's not going to be accessed sequentially. So instantly, you know, it's not a sequential file because a sequential file is read from start to finish. So instantly, it's not B. A large amount of data is to be accessed by different systems. So we're interested in storage of data. So the thing is, and we said it's to be accessed by different systems, right? So when you're sharing data between large systems and you want to store it, you're going to have to store it in some sort of external file. Array of records and two-dimensional array are storage mechanisms within the program itself. And when you do that, you store it into RAM or main memory, right? And main memory, usually for, your average computer, you're dealing with like, say, 8 gigabytes of RAM, right? Which isn't a lot, right? So if you're dealing with a large amount of data, let's say you're dealing with like, thousands of terabytes of data, because you're maybe like a big company, right? These two, store like data structures, which aren't suitable at all, right? Because they deal with the data within a program. So because you're dealing with a large amount of data, different systems, in this case, the relative file is the only way to go, such as in a database. So the answer is A. Okay, 8, consider the following algorithm. What is the output produced? So classic algorithm, check the output question. So now look, you can probably do this in your hand, but one way to always do this, just to double check, is just to do a desk check. So go ahead and write A, B, C, and D. So D in this case is going to be the output, but we'll just write it. So A is 3, B is 4, C is 5. A becomes B plus C. So notice how A is not, the current state of A is not maintained, it's overwritten. So it simply becomes 9, because 4 plus 5. B becomes A, so B becomes 9. C becomes B, so B is currently 9, so it also becomes 9. Now D is A plus B plus C, so 9 plus 9 plus 9 is 27. So display D, so 27, so the answer is D. Okay. Done. Moving on. Question 9. A programmer needs to find out how to code a particular function in a specific programming language. Which type of documentation should they refer to? Find out how to code a particular function in a specific program. Okay, so instantly it's a code in a specific programming language. Okay, so it's not a logbook, because a logbook records what someone has done, like it logs their activity. So we need a very this has to do with syntax, right? Which is like, how do I actually do this using this specific programming language? So it's not a logbook. A user manual is more for the end user. It's not usually for experts, right? So it's not really a user manual, because like a user manual is like, let's say you buy like a coffee machine, right? And then you have a user manual which tells you how to operate the coffee machine, like push the button to warm the water, right? Push here, this is where you enter the coffee beans, right? Whereas for a programmer who's like considered an expert, user manuals aren't usually designed for them. Data dictionary just talks about what data types you're using, and like what variables you're using, and that their data type and how much storage size. So it doesn't really help us with syntax. So in this case, the railroad diagram is the answer, because it's the only thing that deals with syntax. So a railroad diagram is almost a visual representation of what we call EBNF, which is just a way to represent syntax of a language. So the answer is D. Okay, 10. Why would a developer choose to define a variable as global? So the answer is B. So all the other answers are incorrect. That's incorrect. It has to do with code execution, which is incorrect. It results in code that executes more quickly. No. D refers to local. So this is referring to variable scope. So it can either be local or global. And the basic idea is a local variable is self-contained within that module or function. Global is accessible among all the modules and all the functions. Now, in general, best practice is to have only local variables. And if you do share data between modules, you share them as a parameter or as an argument. You do not use global variables. And the reason you do this is because it's easy to accidentally contaminate that variable with data from one module and it's spread to another module. And the problem with that is that if there's a problem that occurs, like a bug, it becomes increasingly difficult to diagnose that bug if the data is being shared unknowingly between different modules and you don't know how it is being used. So if you do share data, usually prefer to do it in an interface like a parameter or an argument. So, all right, moving on. What is the purpose of a benchmark report when developing software? So, so benchmark is basically like a standard that you want the software to hit. So, C is correct. So this is a benchmark report. So D, to guarantee the quality of the developed system meets defined. So this isn't like a guarantee. It's a report, which is a document, right? So this is what we expect our software to meet. It's not about working under different conditions. B is also correct, probably. C is the most correct. B, to inform the choice of technology to be used in the proposed system. Actually, no, my mistake. So no, sorry. It's not to document the standard that the developers must meet in the new system. Sorry, D is correct. To guarantee that the quality of the developed system meets the defined criteria. So the benchmark is the defined criteria. And the purpose of the benchmark report is to make sure the quality meets those criteria, which is the benchmark. So sorry, the answer is D. My mistake. Consider the following structure chart. What is the purpose of this symbol shaped blur? Okay, so first off, let's just explain all the symbols. So the idea is each square is like a module in your system. The lines are connecting. The idea is your hierarchy of here is this is usually the main module, right? The beginning module. And then you read this from left to right, right? So you go from the leftmost point. So the idea is the main module would call this submodule first, and then it would call this module, and then it would call this module, and then it would call this module in that kind of left to right fashion, right? If you had another module down here, you'd go all the way down to the bottom, and then you'd go all the way back up before starting on this one, okay? The empty circle represents data that is being passed, and a filled in circle represents what you call a control flag, right? To get specific, the filled in circle is basically a Boolean, right? True or false. And the data is anything that's not a Boolean. So like an integer, an array, a list, whatever. So now it says not what they are, but what is the purpose of them? So let's check here. To indicate whether the item is found, to indicate that okay, so this is a bit tricky because it tells you, it's asking you for actual context here. So they pass on the error message item not found. They pass on the item details that were found in the list. So we have to read this. Locate item details, get next item ID, find item in list, display item not found, display item details. Okay, so basically, they do not indicate that the search was carried out. They do not pass on an error message. They don't pass on the details that found in the list. They simply indicate whether the item was found. So the idea is this would be a Boolean true or false. So which would be, did they find the item in the list or not? And then this square is what they call a decision, or a better way to describe it, it's an if statement. And this if statement would be dependent upon this Boolean. And the Boolean would obviously be whether you found it or not, given that it says display item not found or not. And then if it is found, you display the item details. So the answer is A. All right, 13. The following algorithm is designed to calculate an average mark. 999 is used as a sentinel value. When the algorithm is coded, compiled, and executed, which type of error is possible? All right, so let's go through it. Count equals count plus 1. Total equals total plus mark. Okay, so this is easy. So how I would solve this is okay, so first off, like the shortcut to do this, right, is that it says it's code compiled and executed, right? That means there's no syntax error because syntax errors would stop it from even compiling properly, right? So it's executed. So it's either a logic or a runtime. System is just a red herring. That doesn't, algorithms don't cause system errors. That doesn't, there's no such thing as a system error in this context. So it's either a logic or a runtime. So now just scanning this, I saw a division, and whenever I see a division, the risk is like, this is the first thing I think of is that there's maybe a division by zero, which, as you know, in maths, division by zero causes infinity, which is basically impossible. So that would be a runtime error. You would force the program to halt. So the first thing I was like, okay, well, can count be zero in any context? Well, it starts off as zero. And I was like, okay, well, if you enter mark as 999, right, as at the beginning, you literally skip the entire loop and then you attempt to calculate the average, and count would be zero, so you'd get a runtime error. So the answer would be runtime, not a logic. A logic would be like if the logic doesn't make sense and you don't properly calculate the average. But in this case, it was just an obvious division by zero. All right, 14. The prototyping process in the early stages of developing a solution was more time-consuming and expensive than anticipated. Why could this have occurred? Modules not readily available. It's probably B. Yeah. So logic errors don't make any sense. It's probably, yeah, the answer is B because like if you're not communicating the business requirements properly to a client, then it's like, then you have to redo everything and that's expensive and time consuming. So B would be the most correct. The others just seem kind of ridiculous. So, because, yeah, like programming, inappropriate programming language to implement the solution, like that seems kind of, so because it says they completed the processing. So yeah, B is the most correct. Programs can be sequential or event driven. Which of the following statements is true? That's false because event driven is just automatically captures inputs. You don't need a loop. Sequential programming is required for automated processes. In an event program, inputs do not affect the order in which the modules are executed. Is a sequential program the user has no control of the order in which the model? The answer is D. I guess, actually, for A, I mean, by definition, event-driven is a loop, right? You keep constantly listening. Like the idea is you're listening for input, so that would be considered a loop. This is false, and this is definitely false. So D is probably the most correct, but A is also true. So 16, the list is being sorted after the first pass. So this might be a difficult question because basically you're dealing with sorting algorithms. So instantly you need to think, what are the sorting algorithms I need to know? And those are bubble, insertion, and selection. So I won't explain those right now, but those are the three you need to know. So let's think about it. The first pass, the list becomes that. Okay, instantly I know it's a bubble sort. So basically with a bubble sort is you bubble either, so the first thing you need to understand with a sort, with a list, is that you need to decide, is the sort working left to right, right to left? And also, are we sorting the data, is sorted by definition ascending sorted or descending sorted, right? So first off, you need to kind of contemplate those four scenarios in your head. In this case, I looked at it there and then I noticed how the 9 is being pushed to the right. So the only scenario where that would occur, and also, yeah, because the 9 was pushed to the right and the 1 stays where it is, the only sort would be a bubble sort, which would be left to right ascending order, so that you're pushing the largest value to the right, right? The reason this is not a selection sort is because how a selection sort works is that you do a linear search over the entire list. You'd find the largest value and then you'd swap it with whatever was there. So if this was instead 7, 1, 2, 4, 9, where you would swap the 9 and the 1, that would be selection. But since you've bubbled up the 9 to the right, it's a bubble sort. Which of the following shows the result of the next pass? In this case, it would be 2, 4, 1, 7, 9. So it'd be B. So easy. 17, which the following contains about, okay, so now we're hitting you with a linear and binary search. So basically, and they give you a table and you basically have to go through each thing and say, is this true or not? Okay, binary search continually discards half the remaining elements. So that is true. Linear search will not search very large arrays. That is false. It will search very large arrays. Only works on an even number of elements. That's false. So we'll just go true, false. Only applicable when each element in the array is unique. That's false. C can only be used with a sorted array. That's true. Looks at each element in order. It's true. Can only search an array with numerical data. It's false. Twice is twice as long as a binary search. That's false. So the answer is C. Interesting how they mention time, right? So this is beyond the scope of this course, but I always tell students this because it's like good to know. So let's say an array has n elements in it. So n, obviously, so like n is the number of elements and it's represented by the letter n. A linear search in the worst case is going to be n, what we call, it's going to have to run through n times, right? You're going to do n comparisons, right? So if there's 5 numbers in an array, you need to look at all 5 numbers in the worst case to find what you're looking for. Now, in a binary search, since you're halving each time, it's actually better than the worst case is that you keep halving until you reach the last element. And in this case, we use log base 2 n in the worst case. So that's the comparison between a linear and binary search in the worst case. Now you might saying, what's a log? So basically the idea is since you're halving the array each time and it gets the remaining elements keep getting halved, there's a logarithmic relationship between those. And I believe it's if you translate that, it's also, yeah, so it's basically like it's basically saying you're halving the array each time. So cool. All right. 18. Program requires users to enter the number of tickets to be purchased. This must be an integer from 1 to 10 inclusive. Which algorithm should be used to validate the entered data? Inclusive. While numtick is less than 1, and okay. So this is wrong because it's like while the number of tickets is less than 1 and greater than 10, which makes no sense because it's either less than 1 or greater than 10. It can't be both, so that makes no sense. So it's not A. B, get. So once again as well, this is just for posterity, this is a pre-test loop. This is going to be a post-test loop because you're testing the condition after. Please enter the number of valid tickets until numtick is greater than 0 and numtick is less than 10. Now, this is close to being true, but since they said less than 10, that doesn't work because you need to include the 10. So it's not B. It's annoying. If it was less than 11, it would work. Get numtick. If numtick is less than 1, technically it doesn't mention anything to do with a loop. So let's see, D. Oh, actually, no, the answer is D. C doesn't make sense because if you enter the wrong thing, you still process the purchase. So the answer has to be D. Yeah, so this doesn't work because you need a loop. Yeah, so the answer is D. All right, the list contains the following data. Following code fragment is run. Which the following contains the list after execution? Add one to index. Okay, so if list index is less than list index plus 1, then okay, so basically how I do this is you just basically do a desk check. So say list I instead of list index, and then do list I plus 1. Do I need anything else? No, it's just I and I plus 1. And then as I'm going through it, I'm just going to literally update the table on the screen as the data changes. So, so index start, and then we can write I. So I starts at 1. So list I would be 7. List I plus 1 would be 3. And we'd say is 7 less than 3? That's false. add 1 to index. So then we say, is 3 and 6. Is 3 less than 6? It is. So what do we do? List index, list I equals so hold on, list index equals list index plus I. So this becomes a 6. So this becomes a 6. Then list index plus 1 equals list index. So it's just 6, 6. Okay, whatever. Then this becomes 3. So list 3 is 6. Then list 8 is 6 less than 8. It is, so therefore, so that becomes an 8 and an 8. And then 8 is not less than 7, so you do nothing. So I think that's it. I think it's just literally 7, 6, 8, 8, 7, 1. So the answer is A. So yeah, so that was easy. So in that case, all you have to do, as I said, do a desk check using list index and list index plus 1 and index, and just write it out and then update the actual array as you go, and you'll find out. And I basically realized that, there's no point doing the rest because it's not going to change. So yeah. All right, lucky last question. Grades are allocated based on a mark as follows. Which of the following algorithms allocates the correct grade for an entered mark? So 0 to 49 is D. 50 to 64 is D. Okay, let's start with A. Get mark. Case where mark is greater than 49. Okay, this is a pretty easy example where this is not going to work because let's say you put in the mark 51, right? You're expecting a grade of, actually, no, not 51. Let's put in, say, 67. Now you're expecting a mark of B, right? If you get a 67, but the problem with the case where is that this will fire as true because technically 67 is greater than 49. So it'll always just be a C, which is wrong. Let's look at B. Grade equals D, get mark. If mark is greater than 70, so this would work, except because this is greater than, not equal to, because like if you have 65, you should get a B. But this says mark is greater than 65. So if you get a 65, you won't get a B. So I don't think that's the answer. Grade equals D, get mark if mark is greater than 49. Okay, this might work because even if you have like say 67, grade would equal C, but then it would be overwritten by this. So I think that might work. Let's just check this. Get mark, grade equals D. Is mark greater than 49? No. Oh, this won't work because like say for 67, so this would be true, greater than 64. 0 to 49. Grade equals C. Greater than 74. Actually not sure what I know C will work. Not sure why. D looks like it might work as well, but I'm not sure. Oh, actually, what the heck? It randomly decides to go here, and so grade is A. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, it's not D. That's bizarre. Yes, the answer is C here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So that's all the answers explained. I'll just go. So pseudocode is pretty straightforward with the if statements. If this is true, execute it. If not, whatever. With a flowchart though, let's just explain the symbols quickly. So this is the terminal symbol. The rhombus or the slanted rectangle is input or output. This is a instruction or a statement which is executed as the rectangle. Diamond is a decision, like in the structure chart, means the same thing. And obviously decision will have a yes or a no. And yeah, those are all the symbols. So it's pretty straightforward. What's interesting, so usually in pseudocode, this would be a if statement. So if this, else that. In this configuration of the flowchart, this would actually be a case where or a multi-way selection, or a switch statement, which is another word for it. So, all right, guys, so that is the 2022 paper, multiple choice. I'm going to leave it there and then do the short answer and the option topic next time.